Several years ago, storyteller researcher Brené Brown gave perhaps one of the most famous and widely listened to TED Talks that there has ever been. In it, she shares the story of her research on the difference between people who go through life with a strong sense of love, belonging, and worthiness, the wholehearted, as she calls them, and those who struggle through life with those things. Over years of research, she discovered something very surprising. The wholehearted, these people who were filled with gratitude and joy, were not people who had lived perfect lives without stress or trauma, without fear or disappointment. They did experience those darker sides of life, because we all do. The difference between the wholehearted and everyone else is that instead of trying to numb their vulnerability, they embraced it. They embraced those moments of grief, shame, anxiety, disappointment. That's not to say that they were comfortable or happy with it. Rather, they viewed vulnerability as something that was necessary, something that cultivated growth, and something that was an intrinsic part of their life story. The act of embracing vulnerability enables people to be wholehearted, to live with a sense of worthiness, of gratitude, and belonging. Although Brené Brown's research is groundbreaking, the essential message of her talk, this message of the importance of embracing vulnerability, is not new. In fact, we find this message in one of the shortest and most powerful teachings of our tradition, grounded in one of the most seemingly mundane verses in our parashah. Just a few minutes ago, we read Parshat Vayakhel, which deals almost exclusively with the construction of the Mishkan, this portable temple that will accompany the Israelites throughout their desert wanderings. We hear of the making of all the pieces of the Mishkan, what materials were needed, how many pieces of this or that were made, who made each feature. Included in this biblical construction manual, we read, "Then Betzalel made the ark of shittim wood, 2.5 cubits in length, 1.5 cubits wide, and 1.5 cubits tall." Now, there doesn't seem to be anything that special or significant about this verse. It isn't a sentence that cries out, "Darsheni, interpret me." And yet, the rabbis of the Talmud saw something very important in this verse. They read these dimensions, compared them to the dimensions of the tablets of the Ten Commandments, and realized that one set of tablets would not have filled the ark. They realized that something else must have been in the ark as well. Remember how Moses went up to the top of Mount Sinai to receive the Ten Commandments? He was there for 40 days, and God inscribed 2 tablets of stone with the 10 divine utterances. But then, God caught wind that the people down below were building a golden calf and worshiping it. So God sent Moses down with these 10 commandments. When Moses sees the people worshiping this statue, he drops the tablets on the ground, and they shatter. The story continues. Moses gets angry, God gets angry, God's ready to throw out the Israelites and create a new nation with Moses. But Moses pleads on the Israelites' behalf, calling upon God's 13 attributes for forgiveness. God ultimately forgives the Israelites, and Moses goes back up Mount Sinai to receive a second set of tablets with the 10 Commandments written on them. This is a powerful story, but there is one gaping hole in it. What happened to the first set of 10 Commandments? The Torah never tells us. Did they lie on the ground like trash? Were they buried like we bury sacred texts today? Did Moses weep as he picked up these sacred shards? Or did he throw them angrily at the people, furious at their infidelity and the loss that it had caused? Were they left and forgotten? Or were they kept as a reminder of what happened? The Torah never tells us, but the rabbis of the Talmud do. When the rabbis read the verse in our parashah containing the dimensions of the ark, they realize that the ark was much larger than 2 stone tablets would have necessitated. And the rabbis utter 5 words, 5 surprising, powerful words. Luchot v'shivrei luchot munachim ba'aron. The tablets and the broken tablets were placed in the ark. At first, this might seem trivial, just a throwaway line. The tablets and the broken tablets were placed in the ark. Big deal. But think about it. Placing something in the ark is no trivial thing. The ark is the center of the camp. It is placed in the Holy of Holies, the most holy place there is, where God's presence is concentrated more than anywhere else in the world. One might assume that God does not want broken pieces in God's house. After all, sacrifices offered in the outer courtyard have to be without blemish. Why would God ever let broken shards to rest in the Holy of Holies? But these broken shards do dwell in the Holy of Holies, right alongside the whole pieces. Luchot v'shivrei luchot munachim ba'aron. The tablets and the broken tablets were placed together in the ark. The first set of tablets is no less holy than the second set, even though they are broken. We all have our broken tablets, the pieces of ourselves that are less than whole, the grief, anxiety, loss, depression, trauma, fear, anger, failures, our vulnerabilities. And our culture tells us to try and hide them, to ignore them, to forgive and forget, to shove them aside in a dark, dusty corner and never take them out. But this ancient teaching about the broken tablets of the Ten Commandments teaches us exactly what Brené Brown's research confirmed. We cannot ignore our broken pieces. We cannot leave them in the dust at the foot of the mountain and journey on to the promised land without them. We must carry them with us, and we must elevate them to the same sacred status as the whole pieces, carrying both the broken and the whole alongside each other. As Brené Brown said in her famous TED Talk, the problem is, and I learned this from the research, that you cannot selectively numb emotion. You can't say, here's the bad stuff, here's vulnerability, here's grief, here's shame, fear, disappointment. I don't want to feel those. I'm going to have a couple beers and a banana nut muffin. I don't want to feel those. You can't numb those hard feelings without numbing the other affects and emotions. You cannot selectively numb. So when we numb those, we numb joy, we numb gratitude, we numb happiness. Perhaps the rabbis recognized this. Perhaps when they said that the broken tablets and the whole tablets were carried together in the ark, they understood that the whole tablets would not have been as holy without the broken pieces by their side. Perhaps the people would not have been able to experience holiness if holiness only included wholeness. Perhaps God would not have been able to reside in a place that did not embrace vulnerability as sacred. And so the rabbis teach us, place the broken pieces alongside the whole ones and carry them with you. Confront and embrace your vulnerability. This is not an easy task. To confront our vulnerability, we have to become vulnerable. As Brené Brown notes, this is difficult and many people do not do it. We need encouragement. We need her TED Talk, and we need the rabbi's teaching to remind us of the importance of being vulnerable. But this work cannot simply be done on an individual level. The point Brené Brown fails to make is the impact that cultural norms play in our willingness or lack thereof to be vulnerable. Jewish tradition recognizes that the entire community must contribute to creating a society in which people can embrace their vulnerability. The Torah spends several chapters describing how the Mishkan, this portable temple, is to be made. When it comes to almost every piece of the Mishkan, the walls, the altar, the menorah, all those dozens of pieces, the Torah says, you, in the singular, shall make. But when it comes to the Aron, the ark in which the broken and the whole tablets are to be carried, the Torah states you, in the plural, all of you, shall make the Aron. This box that you will carry with you on all your journeys, containing the broken and the whole pieces. Throughout the centuries, commentators have wondered why the ark is the only piece of the Mishkan that we are commanded to make in the plural. And many answers have been offered. But perhaps this is to teach us that no one of us can carry our broken pieces if we do not all contribute to creating a framework in which the broken pieces are meant to be placed. In other words, if the broken pieces of the tablets are a metaphor for the broken pieces in our lives, then the ark is a metaphor for the society that we create. And by commanding all of us to build the ark, we are saying that none of us can carry our broken pieces until all of us contribute to creating a society in which vulnerability is embraced. This weekend, the Shaarei Tzedek community is marking one of its most vulnerable moments, and indeed one of the most vulnerable moments in the history of the synagogue in America, the death of Rabbi Morris Adler. This tragic event has left a deep scar on this community, both for those of you who were here in this very room when it happened, and for those of you who joined the community after that terrible day 50 years ago and have lived in its legacy. Rabbi Adler's death has even left its mark on the entire community of Jewish Detroit. During my first visit to the greater Detroit area, when I met my soon-to-be in-laws, I remember driving on the highway by Shaarei Tzedek. My father-in-law, who moved to the area long after Rabbi Adler's death, pointed to this building and told me that that was one of Detroit's great conservative synagogues where a tragic event happened in which a rabbi was shot and killed during a bar mitzvah. He spoke of it so vividly that at first I thought this had been a recent event, only to learn that this event had left such a deep mark that it still lives live in the minds of all in this community. This terrible moment in history is very present in the minds and lives of this community. It is one of the broken pieces of Torah of Shaarei Tzedek and Jewish Detroit and conservative Judaism in America. It's one of the great vulnerabilities in the history of this community. And you recognize the importance of sanctifying this broken piece. Today's service, the displays around the building, and the commemorations of the past few weeks are all testaments to that. Just as the rabbis knew that the broken tablets and the whole tablets needed to be placed in the ark together, so too do you all recognize that the vulnerable moments in your community's history need to be marked and sanctified, just as the joyous celebrations do. But Rabbi Adler's death is only one of many broken pieces that each and every one of us live with. And not all of these broken pieces are as easy to talk about, let alone to treat as holy. We live in a society where we're encouraged to be positive. When people ask, "How are you?" the answer they want to hear is "fine." And if you respond by saying, "My depression is acting up, my mother is having surgery tomorrow, an old friend and I are in a terrible fight," people usually get uncomfortable and find a way to remove themselves from the conversation. While there are tragic moments that we grieve together, when it comes to the day-to-day, personal, less than happy aspects of our lives, we often aren't encouraged to be vulnerable. We aren't encouraged to share the broken pieces. And until we create a culture where it is not only acceptable but encouraged to embrace all of our vulnerabilities, we will live in a society in which individuals are afraid to be vulnerable. As we know from Brené Brown's research, though, if we are not encouraged to embrace our vulnerability, then we will not be among the wholehearted, who feel joy just as acutely as they feel sorrow, who feel love just as acutely as they feel abandonment. And so we must work to create a society that embraces all of our vulnerabilities. We all must help to build a structure that allows people to carry the broken pieces with them. Just as we mark the death of Rabbi Adler together as a community, so too is it upon us to create a society in which we can embrace all of our vulnerabilities. The next time you ask someone how they are doing, really mean it. Really listen to their answer. Be okay if their answer isn't just, "I'm fine." If you know someone is going through a hard time, ask them if they want to talk. And if you yourself are going through a hard time, don't try to ignore your vulnerability. Try to have the courage to share it with someone. Let us embrace the wisdom of the rabbis when they said, "Luchot v'shivrei luchot munachim ba'aron," that the tablets and the broken tablets were placed together in the ark. Our vulnerabilities are part of what makes us who we are. Our moments of trauma are just as sacred as our moments of joy. And we must carry them with us, but we cannot carry them alone. We need a community to help us bear them on our journey. Today, let us remember the tragic end of Rabbi Morris Adler's life. May his memory be for a blessing. Let us honor his legacy and embrace the brokenness that his death brought to this community. And let this encourage us to begin the sacred task of building a society that helps us carry all of our broken pieces with us, so that we too can find healing and comfort and be counted among the wholehearted. Shabbat Shalom.